The following video contains discussions of sex, sexuality, and mentions of 9/11. Viewer discretion is advised. What? The first use of the term Zader is... Zader is an acronym standing for... Okay, hold on. Obligatory background. Invader Zim is a Nickelodeon animated series originally broadcast from 2001 to 2002 with a total of 27 episodes or 46 segments produced and released before its cancellation. The show follows Zim, an alien trying to conquer planet Earth, and Dib, a human trying to stop him. Despite its short run, the series retains a cult following, enough so that decades after its demise, it respawned with a 50-plus issue comic run and an entire film on Netflix. Yes, it seems as though Invader Zim will never truly die. And as Zim lives on, so it is dogged perpetually by its shadow. Zader is an acronym standing for Zim and Dib Romance. It's a ship name with an unusual structure from before the perhaps more familiar format of smooshing two names together, like the Lumini, became more standardized. You can still find ghosts of alternate approaches in other fan communities too. Pokemon comes to mind, where every pairing gets a unique name, like rocket shipping, Poke shipping. But the Invader Zim fandom uses acronym structure for all its pairings. For example, Zater is Zim and Attack Romance. And interestingly, the explicitly non-romantic content flag, ZF, Zim and Dib Friendship. As for why it's called Zader, well, the Fanlore Wiki cites Tumblr user Jarls the Great, who makes the following claim. On one of the major websites Invader Zim fanfiction often circulated back in the day, fan-made characters and traditional ship names such as Dim or Zib could get your fanfiction taken down. So the blank A, blank E/F/R system was introduced as a way of informing others in the community of the relationship in your fanfiction and not risk the site taking your work down. OCs were not allowed, and traditional ship names often sounded too much like an OC name and would get the work taken down. When the site fell out of use, the naming convention just stuck, hence ZADR. For those unaware, fan sites of this era were generally operated by individuals. If you wanted to post fan fiction, you had to email it to the webmaster, who would, read it and decide whether they wanted to host it on their website. You couldn't obfuscate the content of your story by altering the naming convention in the description. On top of that, fanfiction.net launched in 1999, several years before Zim's release. That was the place where users could create accounts and post fanfiction to a shared database, and consequently, its popularity was nearly unrivaled. You could upload fic to DeviantArt, but neither of those platforms had restrictions on shipping or OC content. Web rings are notoriously difficult to parse, so there could be a lost competitor out there. A forum, maybe? But Jarl's bio suggests they'd be too young to have first-hand knowledge of any of this. It's possible what they're saying is true. However, I'm going to have to set aside their claim and stick to my own research. The first use of the term Zader that I can find is on fanfiction.net on October 11th, 2001. The fan pairing is older than that, though, stretching back nearly as early as the show's release date by the looks of it. I went through the archives in reverse order looking for mentions and... wait. Hold on. Oh no. Is this some kid from Long Island processing their 9/11 grief through Invader Zim fanfiction? Jesus Christ. Whew. Curiously, up until this October date, the ship is referred to in many other ways. Zim/Dib, Zib, Z/D, while a different pairing bears the four-letter structure from the get-go. ZAGR, standing for Zim and Gaz Romance, is an acronym that, at this much earlier stage in the franchise's life, is far more pervasive. This person even claims that their associate invented the phrase, and judging from the post date, this seems possible. This person in the comments asserts that the ship name format was really invented by the X-Files fandom, and a cursory search isn't netting me these exact phrases, but I do find a variant, MSR, given top billing on Liminal, a search index for the website Gossamer, which is a dedicated archive of X-Files fanfiction and apparently a powerhouse of its time. Here on the Bulbapedia forums, some people talk about seeing this format in the early days of Pokemon too. But as far as Zim is concerned, well, there's a couple of instances of phrasing like Zim/Dib romance before this point, but even so, it seems that ZAGR is the older and far more heavily used contemporary phrase. Looks to me like the people who adopted the term Zader were following them, even if, as noted, pairing Zim and Dib is just as old a practice. And the amount of material created with this subject matter might be literally endless. We can find this many fanworks with the tag on the modern website AO3, this many on Zim's obsolete contemporary fanfiction.net, this many on DeviantArt, again the relevant contemporary platform, and this many fans on Tumblr, an irrelevant platform. When the show was on air, people were posting Zader. When the show was at its grave, people were posting Zader. Revival? Zader. Exorcism? Zader. This is like the Y2K emo teen spurk. This is a bona fide slash institution, very nearly inseparable from the Invader Zim fandom as a concept, and certainly inescapable within it. So, why? Let's start with who. Who is creating and consuming this material? Well, gay people, I think? In this extremely shoddy survey I put out on irrelevant platform tumblr.info, which was served to people visiting the Invader Zim tag, respondents overwhelmingly identified as some form of LGBT and answered, "I enjoy Zader," at a very high rate. Of course, virtually every respondent identified as LGBT regardless of their feelings about Zader. This is Tumblr. You'd probably get a similar breakdown if you asked, like, who's a fan of artichokes. I'm beginning to think this data is completely worthless. But I am not the first person to make the connection between gay people and Invader Zim. On his blog in 2011, series writer Eric Trueheart wrote of his experience at InvaderCon. "I'm shocked at just how many girls like dressing up as Dib. Seriously, I saw a dozen female Dibs this weekend and barely one male one. It seems like Dib has almost become some kind of butch girl icon. I think that's pretty cool. Makes me sad I never got to write Groina, the crypto-lesbian girl jock character who teams up with Dib in the Pants episode." Fun fact, they ended up doing this one as a comic. There she is. There's her girlfriend. It's great. Go read it. But it's not just Trueheart saying this. In the foreword of The Art of Invader Zim, Zim's biggest name fan of all time, Rebecca Sugar, describes their own relationship to the show growing up. "The 90s weren't the best time to be a queer kid. I entered middle school cautiously optimistic and came out the other side sure I was unlovable garbage. But then, suddenly, like fate, there was Invader Zim. Its particularly misanthropic point of view hit me at exactly the right time. There was something about Dib, especially. His ability to see the obvious and incredible truth, while all the other kids went along obliviously with their own lives, really struck a chord with me." So, Dib is baby's first cybergoth. He's this high-strung kid obsessed with the paranormal, despised by peers who perceive him accurately as fundamentally different from them in some way. Like, it's not just that he dresses weird or acts up in class, he literally perceives the world differently from everybody else and is consequently an extremely isolated character. He spends his time trying to earn the respect of a parent who does not understand him, and occasionally getting roasted by an online forum culture where he is definitely too young to be a member. So, certain people identify with Dib. And some of those people want to bang aliens. This is an extremely pervasive cultural phenomenon. I think the 2017 parody title, Space Babes from Outer Space, sums it up. The idea of, like, an evil volleyball team comes to Earth with the villainous goal of boning as many human men as possible. In fact, one of the first widely reported accounts of an alien abduction was this guy, Antonio Villas-Boas, who, in 1957, gave the story that he basically made it with a Na'vi. Boas claimed he was joined in the room by another humanoid. This one, however, was female, very attractive, and naked. She was the same height as the other beings he had encountered, with a small, pointed chin and large, blue, cat-like eyes. The hair on her head was long and white, somewhat like platinum blonde, but her underarm and pubic hair were bright red. Boas says he was strongly attracted to the woman, and the two had sexual intercourse. On the other hand, you don't see a lot of male alien heartthrobs, maybe because most directors are straight dudes. Instead, you do see a lot of these B-movie posters where a human lady is helplessly ravished by some sort of alien monster. Sensationalist xenophobia? Well, yes. But what's really interesting is comparing this to other accounts by people who consider themselves alien abductees, especially women. There's a wealth of insane information about this in the 1999 book, The Abduction Enigma. It's a meta-study of the titular phenomenon by Kevin D. Randall, a prolific writer in the field of UFOs, and also a veteran Bronze Star Lieutenant Colonel of the United States military. Here's a quote, which I have censored. There is a support group in the Midwest that is made up of abductees who are having intimate relationships with a reptilian alien race. All of the members feel they are being assaulted. They also feel ashamed of the fact that they like it, and that the quality of the experience is well beyond the feelings they have with a human lover. This chapter is riddled with graphic accounts by abductees whose experience of 5-foot-tall, bug-eyed, big-headed alien greys are so explicit I don't think I can repeat them on YouTube. The prototype abduction narrative that is pseudo-medical ritual is, with astonishing frequency, an erotic narrative as well, which maybe shouldn't be surprising given that these are vivid REM hallucinations, the exact time when a human body is cycling through some nocturnal tumescence. And abstraction away from the human form may in fact be part of the appeal. Randall's book makes the intriguing claim that a high number of abductees identify as gay, bisexual, or asexual. In other words, sexualities that most human societies consider to be deviant. And this book is from the 90s. Frankly, even heterosexuality is essentially considered deviant in the United States. So to be forced by an irresistible entity to experience sexual pleasure in a literally alien medical context absent of real-world reminders of human cultural expectations is an attractive fantasy for some, and maybe a critical subconscious outlet for others. Those who claim alien abduction also claim that they have always felt to be on the outside of society and have felt unattractive and unwanted. They are not part of the group and often sit home alone. Now, suddenly, they are important. Alien creatures have found something attractive and desirable in them. The gigantic hurdles of interstellar flight are overcome so that the victim can be taken on board a flying saucer for, more often than not, a sexual encounter. But enough talk of shut-in weirdos. We are here to discuss Invader Zim. People want to bang Zim, in specific. Yes, the funny little green shouty man. So this isn't even remotely the weirdest thing that people want to bang. It's not even the weirdest thing this demographic wants to bang. I'd like to draw your attention to Exhibit A, Bill Cipher. Not to say that the Venn diagram here is a circle, but I do find it to be an extremely interesting case study. Bill Cipher is the villain of Disney's 2012 series Gravity Falls, and one of the most famous subjects of what is known, even on Wikipedia, as the Tumblr sexy man phenomenon. Users associated with the irrelevant platform occasionally fixate on certain fictional characters as sex symbols. In the case of Bill, who is literally a triangle, they may reinterpret the design as like a humanoid twink in a suit. Here they are doing it to this guy from Don't Hug Me, I'm Scared. The most famous example might be the Onceler from Illumination's Lorax, who you will notice is already a twink in a suit. But it was probably not what mainstream culture would immediately grok as like the peak performance man who ladies can't resist. I mean, he's just Dr. Seuss-esque. Anyway, Zim is not temporally stationed to be among this pantheon. However, he has a lot in common with these dudes. They're all villains, for one. I don't want to get too much into that because it's an extremely fraught topic that attracts a lot of bad faith lunatics. But people in general like motivated characters. Ambition is compelling, and danger is exciting. Plus, as I alluded to earlier, for individuals who are ashamed of their own desires, the idea of an uninhibited character pushing them to experience pleasure can be a paradoxically liberating fantasy. And in terms of romantic reasoning, a theoretical character that hates everything and everyone, but likes you, would therefore be an indicator that you, the subject of that positive attention, are special in some way.
Everything I've done for you. I move the stars for no one.
And that's an attractive notion to a lot of people. But back to our case study. The Bill Cipher phenomenon was so prevalent that Gravity Falls creator Alex Hirsch responded to a question about it on X, the everything website formerly known as Twitter. He gave what I feel is a very thoughtful and, for us, useful answer. Reiko asks, Why did you make that flying Dorito attractive? How old are you? 14? You answered your own question. What? I don't get it. Puberty is so confusing that kids will be attracted to anything confident yet non-threatening, even a triangle. I mean, that applied to Zim, right? He's nothing if not confident, and on top of being a cartoon character, he is canonically from an artificial race that reproduces asexually. Can't get less threatening than that. If I have any disagreement with Hirsch on this subject, it's that he's implying this behavior is confined to puberty, but no, I think it's all ages. Look, human sexuality is extremely strange. You'd think it'd be exclusively tied to reproduction, but no, paraphilias are as countless as the stars. And I've noticed that after enough exposure, people tend to conflate the things they like with things to which they are attracted. Like, do you think the majority of bronies started out as people who were into horses? No. Instead, I'm thinking it was something more along the lines of, hey, this show isn't so bad. I guess I'm attracted to this. I'm not a scientist, but I don't think the source of sickoness will ever be untangled from the random mess of DNA that is the human genome. Okay, so is that it? People identify with Dib, they want to bang aliens in general, Zim in specific. Is that the story? Are we done here? No. In fact, we've only just begun. Up till now, I've skillfully dodged the most important aspect of any shipping discourse, which is, what kind of relationship do these characters actually have? Well, they're enemies. Zim is trying to conquer planet Earth, and Dib is trying to stop him from doing that, and ideally reveal to everyone the extremely obvious fact that Zim is an alien. Invader Zim is an interesting show in that both its leads spend time in the role of protagonist, despite being on opposite sides of a conflict. The show starts with Dib positioned as an antagonist, but that pretty quickly changes in the series and the sum total of the comics. And in the Netflix movie, Dib is just straight up the protagonist to Zim's unambiguous antagonism. All that is to say, these are the leads of the show, and they interact a bunch. That alone can tee characters up to be shipped together. It's pretty shallow and surface level, but that really is how a fair number of people engage with media with which they're only somewhat familiar. This stuff borders on nostalgia bait. What if there were two guys and they kissed? What if these dudes were emo teens and they went to prom together? It's like the Fujoshi version of tatted up Disney princesses. Man, is it weird that I find this type of content more offensive than outright pornography? At least engage with the source material. Okay, you've made it to the real video. Before we begin, please review the safety manual. In the source material of Invader Zim, Dib is a 12-year-old human child and Zim is an adult Urkin. A lot of fan content misses this entirely, either because the artist or author is unaware of it, or because they don't like it and have rewritten this aspect of the series to suit their personal tastes. Otherwise, this problem is solved by advancing the timeline past the point shown in the series, depicting the relationship with a teenage or adult Dib instead. Some people have very strong feelings about the idea of aging up characters to create romantic, sexual, or shipping content. If you're one of those people, you may have to close this tab because a discussion of whether or not this practice is problematic is outside the scope of this video. I've got too many fish to fry as it is. So, with that out of the way, let's really unpack this. What kind of relationship do these characters have? At the start of the series, squarely in Zim's point of view, Dib is portrayed as kind of sadistic. He wants to capture Zim and cut him up, and outside of that, he's just got this very schoolyard bully demeanor. Zim is kind of positioned as this fish out of water who's very uncomfortable on Earth and facing all these obstacles that cause him pain, Dib being one of them. And although we still retain parts of this characterization in Enter the Florpus, overall, characterization marches on, sometimes in the span of 11 minutes. Room with a Moose is the first segment in the 9th episode of the series and shows off something different. We start with Zim glowering at footage of himself being bullied by his classmates, Dib in particular. Later, Zim tricks his classmates into boarding a bus that, unbeknownst to them, is taking them to space hell. Dib notices stuff's weird, so he goes to confront the bus driver and... Alright, here's where it gets interesting. Zim, via FaceTime, announces,
"You're really one of the only people who can appreciate the amazingness of this plan, so I'll let you in on what it is."
He laments openly that his world-conquering mission will be less exciting once he's rid of Dib, but, c'est Levesque. Put a pin in that. Anyway, Dib tries to warn the other children about what's happening, but not only do they not believe him, we also get a very clear demonstration of how much they dislike him. Dib's been bullying Zim, but everyone's been bullying Dib, presumably for years, to the point where he considers giving up because maybe they're collectively not worth saving. Ultimately, though, he remembers Zim's gloating about how much smoother his world domination is going to go without Dib around, and that motivates Dib to start conceptualizing himself as Earth's defender and to try to survive after all. In the end, he uses his computer, and then he takes advantage of the fact that he's so openly despised by his classmates to manipulate their behavior, getting them to lean away from him and consequently sending them back on a course to Earth. Despite how unpleasant this exercise is, he feels triumphant when he returns, and he should. The deck is really stacked against him in this show in terms of resources, so any outright thwarting he does is a pretty big win. Zim's been watching the whole time and has a temper tantrum about it. Right. So, this is the dynamic I want to discuss. Zim is most in his element when he's being a villain for an audience, and that audience is Dib.
Sorry, you'll have to move along, hideous goblin. I'm posing dramatically for when the Dib shows up.
To the extent that it doesn't even really make sense. Zim sometimes self-identifies as evil.
Witness my ingenious evil!
But he's a soldier, serving his infallible leaders, so it would make a lot more sense for him to identify Dib as evil. Which he does do here.
Dib! I don't care how delicious he is, he's evil!
That makes sense in context. But yeah, despite that...
Well, guess I'll get on my evil scheme then.
Maybe it does make sense for Zim to have this mindset. He's pretty high-strung and even outright anxious in early episodes, but some of his calmest line deliveries are when he's gloating.
That Zirkin technology you're sitting in, Dib. I'm just reminding it is all. See? Look out the window. I would say I've gotten away with it pretty nicely.
He feels most in control when he's performing as evil. And Dib, well, he's pretty ineffectual. Sometimes he gets to do cool stuff, but a lot of the time Earth gets saved more by Zim tripping over his own dick about it. However, identifying as the hero of Earth is an important part of Dib's psychology.
This is bigger than pizza, Gaz. This is the fate of all mankind.
You and your mankind.
I'm fascinated by this aspect of Backseat Jarvis from Beyond the Stars, where Dib's apparent sincere need to save the Earth supersedes his much more selfish drive to be proven right in the eyes of his father in particular.
Son, there'd better not be any walking dead up there!
It's nothing to worry about, Dad! And I said I was sorry about that!
He's telling him, don't come up here and see what I'm doing, presumably because that might interrupt the fight and gives him an advantage. But make no mistake, the desire for recognition is what drives them both. That's why Zim has these mental walls that are seemingly totally unbreakable, preventing him from even perceiving that his mission is fake and he's in exile. That is until Enter the Florpus, when he encounters information that finally cracks him temporarily. Till Dib gets involved. Put another pin in that. Dib has a little more stability and situational awareness, but his empathy is actually one of his major character flaws, so he's constantly fucking himself over in his reputation quest.
Can't believe I fell for your sad Smoopy act!
But they are parallel quests. Here's a quote from a Collider interview with series creator Jonan Vasquez from the time of the film's release. You know that stuff was in the show. Zim was always seeking acknowledgement from his leaders, and Dib was always incredibly frustrated by his dad's disrespect of Dib's job and function and mission in the world, and they've always had that kind of parallel. Dib with his dad and Zim with his dads. It's not like, hey, show me that you love me. It's like, hey, acknowledge that I'm amazing. As societal outcasts, whom no one has ever taken seriously, Zim and Dib get a lot out of this thing that they're doing. Zim feels important when Dib treats him as a threat. Dib feels important when Zim treats him as an adversary. And as we'll see shortly, the role that this relationship serves their respective characters goes past motivation and veers all the way into codependence. I mentioned earlier that Invader Zim's original run was 27 episodes, but this was not the plan. In fact, there was a lot of material that was actively in production when Nickelodeon pulled the plug, and the show's cancellation has been attributed to everything from real reasons like a tight budget to bloody gore and 9/11. Actually, 9/11 crashed the market and Viacom's stock price, which is an enormous contributor why the show got canned, incredibly. Look, combating Zim-related misinformation would need to be its own multi-hour-long video saga. But for now, I'd like to talk about some of that in-production material that never made it to air. The final episode in Zim's original run is The Most Horrible Xmas Ever, a script that was pulled out of line by the producer's request/demand of an intended story progression. That's why a new character, Minnie Moose, is present with virtually no explanation.
Oh, that's Minnie Moose, my other sidekick. Yep, been with me the whole time.
He was meant to be introduced in an earlier episode that never made it to screen. And surprisingly, we knew a lot about what didn't make it to screen. Scripts, audio recordings, and character designs from canceled episodes are all readily available online and have been for years, which is why I feel almost insane giving such a long introduction to this topic. Like, I've lost all sense of reality about what the average Invader Zim fan already knows. I feel like that XKCD strip. But yeah, some of these canceled scripts stick out as really interesting and took on a life of their own among fans post-series. The Trial is a big one. It contains Zim's entire backstory, including the fact that he killed the previous Irken rulers. Oh my god. But the most popular and infamous canceled episode is Mopiness of Doom. So popular was the story that fans formed a group called Soapy Waffles and spent years animating the episode themselves in Flash using the scripted source material. It's not finished, and it likely never will be, but the hybrid animatic result is so miraculously on model that it makes me laugh to imagine Nick Exec seeing it. Like, a couple of teenagers made this for free? You were charging us $1 million an episode? To be fair, it took a while to get this far. So, why this? What's this storyline that people fixated on to this extent? Well, in this episode, Dib quits. He decides to stop obsessing about the paranormal, stop chasing Zim around, and join his father in pursuit of so-called real science, which is evil, by the way?
I once conducted a similar study, but there were laws against those particular methods.
Like, Membrane Labs is doing some whack shit. But Dib is really good at it. Like, he's actually been squandering his potential as a little genius boy this whole time, which he's alluded to in the show's pitch bible, but frankly not evident in the actual series. And his life improves dramatically. The other kids don't bully him for being weird. He's spending time with his dad, who's so happy and so proud of him. And Zim becomes, like, catatonically depressed.
Why? Why does everything want to hurt Zim? I don't know.
Without an audience, without attention, without Dib, Zim loses all motivation to take over Earth or to do anything at all. The effect is so extreme that even his garbage-brained robot notices, mostly because Gur wants the couch back. And Gur begs Dib to resume their rivalry, saying literally, he needs you.
He needs you, Mary. You two such good friends. Like hot dogs. Please hunt my master again. Couch!
Dib says, sorry, no, everything's better now that I'm doing real science and not fighting stupid green aliens who are stupid baka. But eventually this and some misguided familial advice get to him, and Dib realizes that he feels, quote, empty inside. He busts into Zim's house and announces the fight is back on, to which Zim replies,
You have no idea how happy that makes me.
actually, let's just show this.
I'm gonna destroy you now.
Yeah! You just try!
I'm going to liquefy your organs.
Ha! I'd like to see that!
And off they go. Dib's been immediately captured in some sort of alien bubble. His very participation confirmed as the thing that's actually putting the planet in danger. His life is being threatened by this shitty little monster, and both of them are ecstatic about it. The reason this episode is so popular with Invader Zim fans is probably self-evident. Here are said fans at an InvaderCon live cast reading, behaving in a way that makes me want to set my hair on fire.
Membrane and Dib. Dib wearing a white trench coat now. Busy at work.
Speaking of the crew, you may be wondering how the creator feels about all this. Famously, not great.
I mean, I hope it's not like looking at people's versions of Zim on Tumblr where they're all like making out all the time. You know? It's just boring. It's like, oh, look at them make out and they think they're being like so like, woo! And you're like, no, that's really boring at this point. It's like they don't get it, or they just, it doesn't matter what the show is. It's like, two more people to have doing it. So you see a lot of, like, Zimdick. He doesn't have one, but they're like, well, he doesn't need one. They don't procreate sexually, but to them they're like, what's missing is a space weenie. Oh God. I wish I had different fans, man. Is anyone, be honest, has anyone here drawn Zim's Space Weenie? Anyone? There are liars here. I know there are liars here.
Way back in the Stone Ages of Zim's original run, Jhonen Vasquez said in an interview with the website SF Magazine, thankfully still accessible on the Wayback Machine, people get these ideas, Zim and Dib falling in love ideas, and that makes me ill, to my ill-prone belly. That was 20 years ago at time of recording, and it's clearly still a sore spot. As recently as Enter the Florpus, he's alluding to Zader and Zeta fans as broken people. We'll get to that. But I do get the impression he's not interested in making too big a fuss about it. In a 20th anniversary Q&A stream, Vasquez talked about not wanting to attend InvaderCon because it made him feel like a parent at a slumber party. It wasn't about hating fans, more like the opposite. He said he wanted them to enjoy themselves and have a good time, even if he disagrees with their ideas of good and time. And even though I cringe watching that InvaderCon footage, writer Eric Trueheart's account of the experience is quite sentimental. It made me feel all misty and shit. He was dead on appropriate for this little gathering, a story that in essence says Zim and Dib will be fighting each other for all eternity. The gur-headed crowd swooned at every line. They sure did. And you know, a bunch of the Florpus crew was made up of people who grew up as Invader Zim fans, and they seemed to be having fun with it if these doodles are anything to go by.
In terms of fan art, there's amazing stuff. Sometimes there's space weenies involved, but it's like, damn, that is a really nicely drawn space dick, you know? Like I've seen, I think there are people that I've seen that I would actually contact about, like, I actually have. I've pointed Oni, I'm like, hey, this person's actually really good. See if they want to do a comic. Because, you know, we need to fill pages. And also, there are some incredibly talented people out there.
I think the call is coming from inside the house at this point.
I am going to liquefy your organs! I'd like to see that!
Zip, Dib. Put on the puppet, Andy.
But I'm actually more interested in what Vasquez has said on the subject of Zim and Dib's relationship in his own words. Let's return to that Florpus interview I mentioned 5 hours ago. Dib didn't just want to save the world. He wants you to know that he saved the world. But Dib needs to be recognized. That's why everything in this story happens. He's as much a villain as Zim is. Because everyone always wants for Zim and Dib to try and, well, I wouldn't say everyone. I would just say broken people. But they do help each other, just not on purpose. Dib is a partner in a weird way to Zim by allowing for this awful stuff to happen. That's kind of the premise of Mopiness of Doom. Dib's participation is a major part of what endangers planet Earth. They enable each other. The comics suggest their enmity is like a fated cosmic constant. In every reality, Zim and Dib are destined to fight each other. That's why Gaz, who finds their conflict annoying, still feels compelled to help reinstate it in Mopiness.
All is right with the world again. Stupid world.
I'd like to point out, by the way, how bizarre this quote is from the perspective of, like, the interviewer or anyone uninitiated. Vasquez is essentially speaking gibberish, talking in circles around the specter of Zader. That is the extent to which this fan hallucination has warped the source material, living rent-free in the creator's own head as he tries to talk about the thing that he made without tripping over it. Anyway, I don't have a better place to put this, but as depressed as Zim gets when Dib opts out, it's also worth noting that Dib doesn't do so great in a theoretical victory scenario either. The Zimvoid comic arc features a Dib from an alternate timeline where he does defeat, capture, and apparently kill Zim, only to discover that no one even cares. The revelation that aliens are real has no effect on anyone. Dib's psychologically wrecked by this and ends up doing some weird, terrible shit, unable to let go of the obsessive belief that destroying Zim is this thing he needs to do, even when it's already over. Especially when it's already over. Alright, let's close this codependence discussion on a lighter note. This one is among the last in the comics run and written personally by Vasquez, who by this point had taken a back seat to the comics production. He's back here, so let's see what's on his mind. In this comic, a new kid comes to class, and she's all sunshine and rainbows. She wants everyone to get along and firmly believes that Zim and Dib should be friends. This is a pretty obvious parody of a Zadef fan, and I don't find it particularly hateful. I mean, she clearly means well, but she's totally misguided. Zim and Dib quite calmly explain to her, together, that they don't want to be friends. They're already doing the thing they want to be doing. She gets in their way so much that they briefly team up to get rid of her so they can resume whatever this is. Alright, what is this shit? Seriously. And where are those pins I handed you? So, rhetorically, Zim wants to kill Dib, but no he doesn't. Continuity is pretty loose in Invader Zim, so he can kind of have his cake and eat it too. In the final issue, Zim accidentally creates a time loop, and apparently takes this as an opportunity to kill Dib over and over, but the impermanence of that is what makes it a fun activity. And later, when Dib gains awareness of the loop, Zim's happy to have his company. So, if not to permanently get rid of Dib, what is it that Zim functionally wants? Well, we have a lot of situations where Dib is captured totally helpless and sometimes escapes via his own or another party's intervention, but a lot of the time, no. Half this series is situations where Zim's got him over a barrel and it's like, why don't you just shoot him? He doesn't want to shoot him. He wants to torture him for a while and gloat about it while Dib goes, you won't get away with this. And then, like, Zim just lets him go, I guess? At least if Dib's wonderful life of doom is anything to go by.
You stink, Zim.
And Dib, well...
I'm going to liquefy your organs.
I'd like to see that.
He would. His participation in this is voluntary. This is a thing they do together. This is like an extracurricular activity. This is like a role play. Zim and Dib are getting psychological gratification out of the attention they receive from each other in this reoccurring engineered scenario.
My pulse is rushing, my head is reeling, my face is flushing. What is this feeling?
I am far from the first person to observe a certain cultural motif in media that connects conflict, contempt, and loathing with its inverse. Think Pride and Prejudice, or its metastasized offspring, what Lindsay Ellis calls the sweeping snarky romance.
Animosity, it must be love.
Well, I personally don't agree with the way writer Elie Wiesel's quote, "The opposite of love is not hate, it's indifference," is regularly used out of context. I think when people express this sentiment, they're noticing that both emotions are passionate? Wicked songwriter Stephen Schwartz describes What Is This Feeling as a satire of a love at first sight song, reimagined as a hate at first sight song. Symptoms like a racing pulse or a flushed face are obviously symptoms of a crush, so it's a humorous subversion to point out that there are also symptoms of being pissed off. Some people, especially young people, do experience these things in overlap. I mean, it can be infuriating to lose control over yourself, and to have another person's existence affect you so strongly. Not to mention, it's embarrassing. Look at Helga and Hey Arnold, or this iconic Twitter user who wrote a note telling another girl to, quote, get out of my school.
And then Dib says, "Grah!" in front of the whole class. He makes me so mad. The horrible puny brain meat child with his little glasses and his head.
This phenomenon is even parodied in the show itself, right?
My tallest, a new child attacked me with meat. My conclusion, she's in love with me.
Zim's understanding of this situation is interesting because Urkins are ostensibly incapable of love. He and Dib both assert this matter-of-factly in the comic's 50th issue, echoing Zim's self-description from the unproduced Nubs of Doom script. But,
I love you, cold and feeling robot arm.
the text contains some mixed messages. Of course, the trial pretty much confirms that Zim is defective. He was literally born wrong, so I don't know. He's generally pretty aware of what this feeling means to other species, at least.
I feel I now know enough about human affection. I hate it!
On the whole, though, I'd say a comparison of the Zim-Dib dynamic to Crush Anguish is highly superficial. I'm much more interested in a different phenomenon, that of the dedicated hater. This legendary comic by Kate Beaton kind of sums it up. Nemesis is not a thing that exists in real life, as far as I'm aware. Have you ever met anyone with a nemesis? Comment down below if you have a nemesis. But the idea of it certainly fascinates people. It's a weirdly intimate connection. It often involves obsession. And generally, fictional characters who are portrayed as nemeses are also shown to know each other very well in a way that might resemble how one feels about an old friend. That's certainly how Zim reacts, or a Zim, in the multi-issue comic story Zimvoid. My old enemy. It is you. I thought I'd never see you again. He's happy to see Dib. A Dib. It's a multiverse story. But it's an openly nostalgic and affectionate greeting. Reminds me of another series that portrays an alien race in which hatred is a form of romance. It should be noted that in troll language, the word for friend is exactly the same as the word for enemy. Kinda wonder if that would be true for Urkins too. Some media plays around with this idea in another way, where heroism and villainy are like day jobs, and characters who are ostensibly enemies in a formal sense can routinely have casual conversations with each other about the insane shit that they're doing.
You have nothing else to do but harp on Dr. Venture? Why haven't you tried the world domination thing? You afraid of the big leagues?
Please, how stupid do I look to you? World domination. I'll leave that to the religious nuts and the Republicans, thank you.
I'd say the cast of Invader Zim is a little too unstable for this to happen very often, but we do get exchanges like this in Hamstergeddon.
If you are referring to my reaction to that hair monster, I can assure you that like the other normal children, I find it
cute. The word is cute. Humans think hamsters are cute. Anything you'd like to confess?
No, don't be silly.
These are some of my favorite scenes. Dib just seems so over it. It's really funny.
Do I even have to say anything at this point?
I don't know, Zim is just too difficult to have this kind of humorously normal conversation with for the most part. He just shouts nonsense and Dib responds with these paradoxically rational observations.
Man, you have a problem with listening, Zim.
Isn't it?
I am Dib.
What? But give me a sec here.
We know each other.
Yeah, feels weird to say it, but they do know each other. They're mortal enemies, but the consequence of that is they hang out all the time. And we here in the human world have a somewhat difficult time separating that type of interpersonal familiarity from friendship. I'd argue it's a running gag in the series itself. Membrane thinks Zim is Dib's little foreign friend. We've got that Zadef parody comic I mentioned earlier. Actually, that story bears a striking resemblance to one of the unproduced scripts, The Return of Keith, in which the titular character, having apparently recovered from his horrific eyeball and personality transplant in the show's second episode, now insists that Zim and Dib be friends. They can't seem to shake him, and the episode ends with them feigning acquiescence to his weird demands. The sight of them hugging makes him so happy he literally explodes, which rids them of his presence and solves the problem, I think. There's another issue of the comic centering on this misunderstanding, Dibnapped, where aliens hold Dib hostage to try to get to Zim, mistakenly believing that because they spend so much time in proximity to each other, they must be best friends. Their plan does not work, obviously. There's a lot of contrivance like this in the comics. Here they are captured by different aliens playing I Spy to pass the time. Or, well, trying to. Zim? That reminds me, there's one more piece of print media I'd like to talk about, and it's not from the Oni press run. It's actually much older than that. This 4-page spread appeared in the fall 2002 special issue of Nick magazine, written and illustrated by Vasquez himself. In this story, Zim successfully conquers Earth while Dib isn't looking. Satisfied, he's gearing up to leave the planet and put some horrible robots in charge in his stead. Dib is like, no, but this is horrible. And Zim invites Dib to leave with him. And Dib accepts. He ditches this ruined Earth to go drink smoothies in space with Zim. Look, I wouldn't take any piece of Zim media seriously. It's a deeply unserious show. But I think we can at least say that the seed of the idea is there, that these two are ultimately, on some level, just hanging out with each other in the weirdest way possible. Well, we've covered a lot of possible answers to this question. We have a population of some people who engage with the material in a more shallow sense, casually creating and consuming content about a property for which they are nostalgically fond, but maybe not thinking too much about. More like, what if there were two guys and they kissed? Dig a little deeper, and we find a population that brings its own baggage and non-normative interests to the table. People who project their own experiences onto Dib as an outcast little weirdo, preoccupied with the paranormal. And with it, for them, comes like an alien stuff. Humans do seem to have a tendency to connect things they enjoy with things to which they are attracted, a phenomenon that can manifest in varying degrees of paraphilia. Zim himself is a charismatic villain, and we know that does it for a whole lot of people. But I'd say, for the truly invested, it's the source material itself that's kept the fandom going all these years. It may not be the intended interpretation, but at the end of the day, it is a series about two characters who are codependently obsessed with each other. As enemies, yes, but as we've discussed, that can be a complicated thing to untangle for a human audience. Should this be a new saying of some kind? Any sufficiently dedicated haterdom is indistinguishable from intimacy? Something like that. Wow, you've done it! You've reached the end of the video. Let's see, we've covered demographics, projection, paraphilia, the source material, the cancelled source material, the supplemental source material, the creator's intentions, the intersectionality of love and hate in the collective cultural consciousness, Homestuck, 9/11. So, do we have our answer yet? What was the question? Why is Zader? I guess to that, my answer must be, why not?
Zim is not my best friend.
He's wonderful.
No, he's the worst.
You love him?
No!